20s and the 30s. In the 20s and the 30s, early 30s, everything had already shifted intellectually. But even when Roosevelt ran in 1932, he ran on a conservative platform, the gold standard and balanced the budget, and criticized Hoover for doing all the dumb things. But the intellectual community had already come to the welfare state and socialism, and that, is, of course, is what Roosevelt responded to. I think it may well be reversed right now, because now when I go out and talk to colleges and campuses and kids and all, they know what Austrian economics are, and they know about the Federal Reserve. I mean, just think of the momentum we have on the Federal Reserve, auditing the Fed. So I would say underneath, the momentum is on our side. But in Washington, and the intellectual communities are still very statist. This to me is very encouraging, but we have to translate that eventually into political action. But the contest is on, and we have a long way to go yet.
Congressman, what are the tricks up the sleeve of the establishment? The people don't want socialized health care. They don't want open borders. They don't want new wars. They don't want a private Federal Reserve that's above the law. But the establishment, it seems, instead of trying to give an olive branch, seems to be entrenching themselves further. I mean, you're a well-read person. I'm sure you know Alabama's announcing they're going to use regular Army as their new police force. Schenectady, New York's asking for federal troops. The Marines in California are running DWI checkpoints. CNN and Fox are reporting the Army's going to lock down cities and try to carry out forced inoculations. Now, they're trying to announce this. I'm not saying they're going to get away with it, but they're certainly saying it. Martial law was threatened against Congress last year. They didn't give in to the bankers. Clearly, Northcom, it appears, is a receivership arm now for the offshore corporations that are trying to sanguinate or absorb the United States. Your comments on the swine flu, the hype, the fear, it's killed less than 200 people in the U.S., and the regular flu kills 37,000, the CDC says, but they're saying the end of liberty, the end of freedom, forced inoculations because of a couple hundred dead. Is this an excuse for federal expansion of power?
Yeah, it's pure propaganda, to get us involved overseas. It's war propaganda on somebody's going to attack us with a nuclear weapon if we don't go in and invade other countries. The same way or domestically scare people. Most people don't know what you just said, that tens of thousands of people die from flu every year, and now we have a couple hundred, and they want us to just sacrifice our choices and just say, oh, okay, if you tell us we need a shot, we'll do it. But there will come a time when there will be enough of us that will just raise Cain. But the other thing that's happening is the government's running out of money. There's a limit. They can have a lot of war propaganda, but if they don't have any money and can't fight these wars, the empire ends. Same way domestically. That's why people should be prepared for bad times and survival reasons, know how to take care of themselves, know something about personal health care. And there probably will always be an underground economy, regardless of how bad it gets, which means there will be, even in the Soviet system, the people who were in the know-how and always ended up with a private doctor. But let's hope it never gets that bad. That's the whole thing. That's what we work so hard to try to prevent. But when you hear these stories about the use of force and the use of martial law and the tremendous invasion of our privacy, that to me is scary, that nothing is private anymore. Everything in the government is secret, and your privacy is non-existent. That is where the real problem is. We need to reverse that sentiment.
Well, Congressman, you are a medical doctor, and I pulled up your quotes from the 70s when you came out and said, we've had a few deaths at a military base. That, by the way, was triggered after an inoculation. And then thousands died. Tens of thousands got sick from the swine flu vaccine itself. You were proven right then. How did you know it was a fraud in 76, 77? And I know you've spoken out against it today. Can you specifically give us your take on where it's going? Because it looks like, from my research, Obama is going to use fear over this flu as a political smokescreen and as kind of a false flag or controlled crises so government can grandstand as our savior to push through the carbon tax in the Senate, to push through the amnesty, the gun control, the socialized health care. That's why you now see Pelosi and others saying, we're going to try this in October. Do you concur that looks like how this is triangulating? Or give us your expert.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think, yes, there'll definitely be some votes in September and October for them to bring this up. But on the inoculations, the main reason why I was skeptical even in '76 is I don't like the mass treatment of people. It's just bad medicine. That doesn't mean that I have an attitude that inoculations are never good. Matter of fact, I think polio was truly eradicated by inoculation as well as smallpox. But the question is should government be making massive decisions? Under the Constitution, there's not supposed to be any government involvement at all. So, but government's inept. I remember that vote in '76. It was interesting. There were two of us that voted against it, and the other one was Dr. Larry McDonald. And I'm sure you remember that name, but he and I were the only two, and we were, I think there were 3 physicians in the Congress, but the 2 of us as physicians voted against it, believing it was bad medicine.
Yeah, I would ask you, Congressman, please don't take any flights from Alaska to South Korea.
No, I don't plan to do that.
Well, I think there'd be a revolt in this country if they did to you what they did to McDonald.
Yeah. So,
certainly.
We will continue the fight. There is no doubt about that. But the momentum is on our side. You know, people have warned me all about taking on the Federal Reserve, but the momentum is building. You know, we worry about how much pressure they have and how much authority they have. But because we've done our grassroots work, we've gotten the large majority of members of Congress to support our auditing bill. And that didn't come from me persuading the congressman. That came from exactly what's going on at these town hall meetings, the people being upset. In this way, I think we harness the energy in the correct way and say, look, there's a problem there, and one of the problems is they don't tell us what they're doing, and here we have this secret organization that prints money, spends the money outside the budget, and people have responded, and that's why we have this 282 members of Congress on it. I suspect we're going to get more. Once we hit the 290, which means that we'll have 2/3 vote, or the 300, right in that area, I think that's the time I'm going to really start putting pressure on the leadership to bring this up. So far, they're indicating that they'll bring the bill up, you know, in a mixture of other bills, but they might get bogged down. So I think after we go back there, you may be hearing some announcements on where we want to direct our energies, because we have such great momentum on that issue.
And then if the Senate tries to block it with a procedure, that is going to be political suicide, isn't it? Because, I mean, in polls, over 75% of Americans want to audit or abolish the Fed. That will only say, what are you hiding? Why can't we look at what you're doing? I mean, did you see Bernanke? Well, obviously you did, sputtering and bumbling around on PBS in Kansas City about why no one can see the books. I mean, he looked like Sylvester caught with Tweety Bird feathers sticking out of his mouth.
Yeah. And, you know, what I'm suspecting, and we'll see if I'm right about this suspicion, is I think eventually they're going to use national security as an excuse to keep the books closed. You know, a lot of times what the CIA does and all, they say, oh, national security, you're not allowed to know this. We can't try this person, national security, because they do use funds to get involved in foreign affairs, because they can make deals with other governments, other central banks, international financial organizations, and that's the kind of stuff that they don't want us to know about. So if there's some really big deals going in there and they don't want us to know about it, we'll see. We'll see if they start talking about, well, some of this stuff you guys shouldn't know because that might undermine our national security.
Okay, Congressman, we've got about 12 minutes left. I want to move quickly now through a whole host of questions. For stations, a network break's coming up. It's our break. We're skipping it. The network's not taking it. Congressman Ron Paul is our guest till 30 after. Congressman, specifically on the economy, they told us 3 years ago we weren't in a recession. Then 2 years later, they admitted we'd been in one for over a year. Now they said a year ago, green shoots. Now they're saying again, the economy's wonderful. We've turned the corner, when every major indicator of joblessness and you name it is getting worse and worse. Anybody on Main Street knows we're in trouble. Maybe it's good for bankers getting billion-dollar bonuses. What do you, as an economist, as a doctor, as a congressman, what do you see happening? What is the data you're seeing? Is this just more political hype to stall the imploding poll numbers of Barack Obama?
Yeah, I think so. And the one group that is doing quite well is that Goldman Sachs group. I mean, their business is booming and their profits are booming, and they've lived off the